Pirates, Opium and Good Neighbors, how Solovyov justifies the current war by rewriting the history of Britain and Europe. Russia discusses peace without Ukraine. The negotiating activity surrounding Ukraine, from the meeting of American emissaries in Moscow to the covert consultations in Geneva and Miami, is accompanied by no less activity on Russian television. Vladimir Solovyov's programs have recently turned into a kind of ideological commentary on the current situation. Viewers are explained what exactly should be considered the reality of the peace process. It's important for European readers to understand. This isn't so much propaganda as the formulation of political goals, which the Russian government then attempts to present as objective conditions for the negotiations. In Solovyov's studio, these goals are expressed much more openly than in official press releases. 1. A peace process without Ukraine, a new axiomatic thesis. The central idea, repeated in various formulations, is that Ukraine is not a subject of negotiations. According to Solovyov and his guests, key decisions are made between Russia and the United States, while Kyiv is merely a receiver of decisions made in other capitals. Ukraine is not needed. Its opinion need not be taken into account. The issue of NATO membership can be resolved directly with America, without the Ukrainians. These formulations are not accidental, but a systemic narrative. It creates the grounds for two consequences. Moscow can interpret any disagreement from Kyiv as insignificant and temporary. The very existence of the Ukrainian state as an independent actor is called into question. For the Russian audience, this is presented as real diplomacy. A violinist is not needed, a formula that is intended to justify Ukraine's exclusion from discussions of its own territories and borders. And in fact, our side also emphasizes that the technical consultations were about general principles, so to speak, possible scenarios for a peaceful settlement. You know, I've been reading the European, Western, especially European press this morning. Of course, they're incredible hypocrites, liars and disinformationists. So what are the main messages? First, Russia rejected Trump's peace plan, or even Europe's. So it turns out Europe had a peace plan, which Russia angrily rejected. So we explain we didn't reject anything. They outlined various options. Incidentally, almost no one in the West paid attention to Ushakov's words about there being one document. Now there are 4, plus 4 more documents. Well, that is, in the end, we understand, yes, why they appeared like this, what it is, at least roughly, with whom, with which entities, various agreements are possible to sign. In the West, this wasn't noticed at all. Yes, when they were talking about how Russia turned out to have rejected it, and so on. And this is also very important. It's just a nuance, yes, but it's very revealing of how Western disinformation works. Ushakov repeated twice, yes, when asked whether we were closer or further away from a possible peace agreement. He repeated twice, definitely not further away, yes. I opened the British Times newspaper, yes. Russia said we're no closer to a peace agreement, yes. Well, there you go, but as if closer and further away are essentially the same thing, yes. 2. Normalization of the division of Ukraine thesis. Particularly noticeable is the open discussion of the future map of the region. Options that official diplomacy has so far avoided are being quietly floated in the studio. Cut Ukraine off from the sea. Take Sumy, Kharkiv and Dnipropetrovsk. Odessa, Mykolaiv and Izmail, obviously. The option of dividing the country between Russia, Poland, Romania and Hungary. This rhetoric is not a random outburst. Its purpose is to normalize the idea that a revision of borders in Europe is possible and desirable. desirable if it serves Russian interests. It is important for European readers. Such statements are not presented as emotional hyperbole, but as a technical, pragmatic analysis of future actions. This is a qualitative shift compared to 2022, when public discussions of border changes were still avoided. 3. Moscow dictates the terms. Military success as a negotiating argument. The second pillar of the rhetoric is the assertion that Russia has the right to dictate terms because it is winning the war. The episode details the collapse of Ukrainian air defences, a shortage of reserves, a moral crisis in the Ukrainian army, encirclement in the combat zone, the imminent moment when the last light bulb goes out. This leads the viewer to the main conclusion. Territorial concessions are inevitable, and their scope is merely a matter of technical discussion. From Moscow's perspective, peace is not mutual compromises, but the recording of military successes. This approach makes any negotiating formulas in which Ukraine retains strategic autonomy impossible. 4. Europe as a weak and hypocritical observer. In Solovyov's rhetoric, Europe is portrayed as a destructive or indecisive actor. Hypocrites and liars, disinformers, leaders who themselves understand that Russia cannot lose, countries that sabotage US-Russian deals. This narrative thread simultaneously accomplishes two goals. First, it demoralizes the European public, suggesting that the EU is completely excluded from the real process. Second, it reinforces the Russian audience's belief that any EU initiatives are pointless and cannot influence the outcome